Kunle had always dreamed of a life of luxury, but he didn't always have the money to back it up. Born into a poor family in Lagos, he spent his early years struggling, doing odd jobs to get by. Life was hard, but Kunle had a dream. He was determined to make something of himself. He had no idea how, but he knew he had to keep trying. Sarah, on the other hand, came from a wealthy family. Her father owned a large real estate company in Lagos, and her mother came from a line of well-known business owners. Sarah was beautiful, charming, and the center of attention wherever she went. She had everything she could ever want: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and a life of comfort. But there was one thing Sarah wanted more than anything: a man who could offer her more. Kunle met Sarah when he was working at a cafe in Lekki, one of the most fashionable areas in Lagos. She walked in one day, looking as perfect as always, her long hair bouncing with every step, her outfit a perfect blend of style and class. Kunle had never seen someone like her before. He tried his best to act calm, but inside, his heart raced. He was used to serving rich customers, but this woman, this was different. "Can I get a cappuccino?" Sarah asked, her voice sweet and smooth. Kunle nodded, trying his best to hide the nervousness he felt. "Sure, coming right up." As he made the cappuccino, Kunle couldn't help but steal glances at Sarah. Her smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds. She was everything he had ever dreamed of. But he was just an ordinary guy. He didn't have the kind of life she was used to. Still, he couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to be with someone like her. When Sarah came to pay for her coffee, Kunle tried his best to make conversation. He didn't want to seem like just another worker to her. "You're new here, right?" Sarah asked, noticing his name tag. Kunle smiled nervously. "Yes, just started last week." "Oh, that's nice. I come here often. It's a good spot." Kunle couldn't believe his luck. She was talking to him, and as the days went on, Sarah kept coming back, and slowly, Kunle found himself talking to her more. They began to share laughs, stories, and soon, Sarah was asking Kunle to meet her outside the cafe. She seemed to enjoy his company, and Kunle couldn't believe it. A beautiful, rich woman like Sarah wanted to spend time with him. Their relationship grew over time. Kunle would meet Sarah at fancy restaurants and expensive shopping malls. He felt like he was living in a dream he never thought possible. Sarah loved the attention Kunle gave her. She loved how he would listen to her every word, making her feel special, even when no one else did. But there was something Sarah didn't know. Kunle was still struggling. He had just landed a small job at a tech company, but it barely paid the bills. He lived in a modest apartment, and his wardrobe was nothing compared to the high-end clothes Sarah wore. Still, he kept the truth from her. He wanted to believe that he could build a life with her, but deep down, he feared that one day, she would realize he didn't belong in her world. As Kunle's feelings for Sarah grew stronger, so did his desire to give her the life she deserved. He dreamed of becoming successful, of being able to provide for her in ways he never could before. But life, as it often does, had other plans. One day, Kunle received an offer to join a startup company that was working on an innovative new product. It was a big risk, but Kunle saw it as his chance to finally make something of himself. He didn't want to be stuck in his old life anymore. He was going to prove to Sarah that he was worthy of her love. Kunle worked tirelessly, dedicating every waking hour to his new job. It was hard, but he was determined. Weeks turned into months, and slowly his hard work started to pay off. The startup began to grow, and Kunle's role in the company became more important. He was finally making more money than he had ever imagined. Felt like everything was falling into place. But just as things were looking up, Sarah began to pull away. She became distant, cold even. Kunle didn't understand what was happening. Had he done something wrong? Was it his job? His money? Was he not good enough anymore? One evening, Sarah invited Kunle to dinner at an upscale restaurant. She looked stunning as always, but there was a coldness in her eyes. Kunle couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "I think we need to talk," Sarah said, her voice serious. Kunle's heart skipped a beat. He had been working so hard to make his life better. And now, Sarah was about to end things? Is everything okay? Kunle asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah sighed. I don't think this is working anymore, Kunle. I've met someone else. Kunle's world shattered. He had worked so hard for this moment, believing that everything would be okay, but now it seemed like it was all for nothing. Sarah, the woman he had fallen so deeply in love with, was leaving him. And for another man. I don't understand, Kunle whispered, his voice barely audible. I thought we had something special. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of sadness and indifference. I'm sorry, Kunle, but I need someone who can give me everything. Someone who can keep up with my lifestyle. And just like that, she walked away. Kunle watched in disbelief as Sarah disappeared into the night, leaving him broken and alone. Months went by. Kunle worked even harder, pushing himself to the limit. He built his own company, invested in successful ventures, and eventually he became a billionaire. But despite his success, there was still something missing. Kunle had everything he could ever want, but he couldn't forget Sarah. She had been his dream, his reason for pushing forward, and now she was just a memory. One day, Kunle was driving down the streets of Lagos when something caught his eye. There, sitting on the corner of a busy street, was a woman. She was dirty, ragged, and holding a sign that read, "Homeless. Please help." Kunle's heart stopped. Couldn't be. He pulled over, his hands shaking. He got out of the car and walked towards the woman. And as he got closer, his heart sank. It was Sarah, but she didn't recognize him. Her once beautiful face was now pale and gaunt. Her once glamorous clothes now torn and covered in dirt. Kunle stared at her, unable to believe what he was seeing. How had it come to this? How had Sarah, the woman who had once turned her back on him, ended up here on the streets of Lagos? And why couldn't she recognize him? Kunle's mind raced with questions. He wanted to say something, anything, but he couldn't find the words. He had to act fast. What would he do next? Would he help her? Would he confront her? The questions hung in the air as Kunle stood frozen, staring down at the woman who had once left him for another man. Kunle stood there, staring at Sarah, unsure of what to do. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind was racing. The woman he had once loved, the woman who had left him when he was at his lowest, was now sitting on the cold, hard ground, asking for help. His eyes scanned her dirty clothes, her face that had lost its once radiant glow, and he couldn't reconcile the image of the strong, proud woman he had known with the person in front of him now. His legs felt like they had turned to stone as he struggled to find his voice. The sight of Sarah in such a pitiful state, begging for help, stirred something deep inside him. Was this some kind of cruel twist of fate? How had Sarah fallen so far? Sarah? Kunle finally managed to say, his voice shaking. She didn't look up at first, her eyes focused on the ground in front of her as she held out her sign. Please, she mumbled softly, barely lifting her head. I'm not in the mood for any more pity today. Kunle's heart sank even further. The woman who had once been so proud, so confident, now seemed broken beyond repair. He stepped closer, kneeling in front of her, his voice gentle. It's me, Kunle, he said softly. Do you remember me? Sarah's eyes snapped up to meet his, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of recognition in her tired, tear-filled eyes. But it quickly faded as she looked away, her lips trembling. I don't need your help, Sarah muttered, as if trying to convince herself. I made my bed. I have to lie in it. Kunle's heart shattered. He had never imagined that one day he would find Sarah like this. After everything that had happened, after she had left him so brutally when he was struggling, this was the last thing he expected. Yet here she was, and he couldn't just walk away. No, Sarah, Kunle said, his voice firm. You don't deserve this. You're not alone. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face as she looked away. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through. Kunle felt a mix of anger and sadness rise in him. He had been through hell too. He had fought to build the life he had now. He had worked tirelessly, endured rejection, and never gave up. But now, the woman who had once rejected him because of his lack of wealth was here, sitting on the streets. "I know that you're not the same person you were back then," Kunle said. "But I'm here now, Sarah. I've made something of myself. Let me help you. Let me help you get back on your feet." Sarah remained silent for a long time. Kunle sat there, waiting for her to say something, anything. But all she did was look down at her hands, trembling in her lap. The shame in her eyes was almost unbearable. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand, Kunle. I thought I had it all. Everything I ever wanted. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Kunle reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. "Tell me what happened. Let me help." It took several minutes before Sarah spoke again. She seemed to be gathering the strength to relive the worst moments of her life. "When I left you, it wasn't because of you," she began, her voice shaky. "It was because I was scared. I was scared of not having the life I was used to. I thought I needed more money, more status, more luxury. And when I saw that you couldn't give me that, I thought I had to leave. But I was wrong, Kunle. I regret it every single day. Every day has been a struggle since then." Kunle listened, his heart aching for her. He could see the deep regret in her eyes. She had made her choice, and now she was paying the price. But it didn't make the pain of her betrayal any less. "Why didn't you reach out to me?" Kunle asked, his voice soft. "Why didn't you try to fix things?" Sarah sniffed, wiping her eyes. "I thought I could make it on my own. I thought I could be strong, that I could survive without anyone else. But it's not true. I'm not strong. I've lost everything. And now, I don't know where to turn." Kunle felt a rush of empathy for her. He had been where she was, struggling to survive, feeling like the world was against him. He had built himself up from nothing, and now, here she was, lost in a world that had rejected her. "You're not alone, Sarah," Kunle said again. "You don't have to do this by yourself." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and disbelief. "But why, Kunle? After everything I did, why would you help me?" Kunle took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "Because I believe in second chances. And because, no matter what happened between us, you were still someone I cared about." Sarah's expression softened as she processed his words. It was clear that she hadn't expected this kind of kindness from him, not after what she had done. But Kunle meant every word. He had learned the hard way that kindness and empathy were the true measures of a person's worth. Not money, not status. Kunle stood up, extending a hand to her. "Come with me, Sarah. I'll help you." For the first time in a long while, Sarah hesitated. She looked down at her dirty clothes and then at Kunle, who was now offering her a way out. She could feel the warmth of his hand, a lifeline that she wasn't sure she deserved. But after a long pause, she slowly reached up and took his hand. As Kunle helped her to her feet, a sense of hope flickered in her eyes. Could this really be the start of something new? Could Kunle's kindness help her rebuild her life? Or was it already too late for her to make things right? As Kunle led Sarah toward his car, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. She had hurt him deeply once, and now she was asking for his help. Could he trust her again? Could he truly forgive her? Just as they were about to get in the car, Kunle heard a voice from behind. "Kunle, wait!" He turned to see a man rushing towards them. The man's face was familiar, and Kunle's heart skipped a beat. It was someone from Sarah's past, and he wasn't happy to see Kunle helping Sarah. "Who do you think you are?" the man demanded, stopping just in front of Kunle. "You really think she deserves your help after what she did to you?" Kunle froze. The tension in the air was thick, and Sarah's face went pale. She stepped back, a look of fear in her eyes. "Who is this?" Kunle asked, his voice cold. But the man just glared at Kunle, his jaw clenched. "I know Sarah. I know exactly what she's capable of. You don't want to get involved with her. Trust me." Kunle turned his attention back to Sarah, who was now standing there, visibly shaking. "Sarah, who is he?" Kunle asked, his voice sharp. Sarah's silence was deafening, and Kunle's mind raced. What was going on? Why was this man so angry? The questions lingered in the air, unanswered. What was going to happen next? Kunle stood in front of the man, his body tense, trying to process everything that was happening. Sarah's silence only made the situation worse. The man who had approached them had an air of authority, as if he knew something that Kunle didn't. Kunle's eyes darted from the stranger to Sarah, who now seemed to be shrinking, her hands trembling at her sides. The man's expression was full of contempt as he looked from Kunle to Sarah. "You don't know anything about her, do you?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're helping her, but you have no idea who she really is." Kunle's patience was wearing thin. "What's your problem? If you know something, then tell me. Who are you?" The man crossed his arms and took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "I'm someone who knows what Sarah's really like. I know what she's done, and I know the mess she's gotten herself into. You're just another fool who's going to get burned by her." Kunle's chest tightened. He could feel Sarah shrinking behind him, but he refused to turn around. He wasn't about to let this stranger intimidate him, especially not when it came to Sarah. "Look," Kunle said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I don't know what your problem with Sarah is, but I'm not going to stand here and listen to you talk down to her. She's been through enough." The man's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't get it, do you? She's been playing games for years. She left you once, and now she's trying to worm her way back into your life because she's desperate. She's lost everything, and now she's trying to find someone to save her. But it's too late. She's used up all her chances." Kunle was taken aback. The words cut deeper than he expected. He turned to look at Sarah for the first time, and the look on her face was like a punch to the gut. She looked so small, so fragile in that moment. Her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and fear. Kunle took a deep breath and turned back to the man. "I don't care what you think. I care about what I believe. If Sarah is asking for help, then I'm going to help her. It's that simple." The man scoffed, his eyes darkening. "You think you can fix her? You think you can just erase everything she's done?" He paused, his gaze lingering on Sarah. "You don't know the half of it. If you want to save her, you're going to have to be ready to deal with the consequences." Kunle felt a chill run down his spine. What did he mean by consequences? What had Sarah really done? Before Kunle could ask another question, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kunle was left standing there, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sarah didn't say a word, but her face was pale, and her hands were still shaking. Kunle turned to her, his heart aching. "Sarah, what did he mean? What's going on?" For a long moment, Sarah didn't respond. She stared down at the ground, her lips trembling as if she were afraid to speak. Kunle's frustration grew, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Please, Sarah," Kunle said, his voice soft but urgent. "You need to tell me. I'm trying to help you, but I can't do that if you keep hiding the truth." Finally, Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Kunle, I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want you to know everything I've done." Kunle stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "What have you done, Sarah? What did that man mean by consequences?" Sarah took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. "It's not as simple as it looks. I made a lot of bad decisions. I got involved with people who weren't good for me, people who didn't have my best interests at heart. And when I realized that, it was too late." Kunle's mind raced. "What kind of people? What did you get involved in?" Sarah hesitated, looking around as if she were afraid someone might be listening. "I was with a man who promised me everything. He said he could give me everything I ever wanted. But he wasn't what he seemed. He's dangerous, Kunle. He's the reason I ended up on the streets." Kunle's mind was spinning. "Wait, you're telling me that this man, the one who confronted us, is the reason you ended up like this?" Sarah nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Yes, he made promises he couldn't keep. And when things didn't go his way, he turned on me. He took everything I had, my money, my connections, my status, and then he discarded me. Left me with nothing." Kunle's anger flared. "Who is he, Sarah? Who's this man?" Sarah looked down at the ground, her voice barely a whisper. "His name is Wosu. He's a businessman, but not the kind of businessman you'd want to be involved with. He's ruthless. He doesn't care who he hurts, as long as he gets what he wants. And I was just a pawn in his game. Kunle's jaw clenched. He had heard of Wosu before. He was notorious in the business world, known for his cutthroat tactics and shady dealings. Kunle had always kept his distance from people like him. But now, it seemed like Sarah had been dragged into his world. Kunle took a deep breath. So this man is the one who's been pulling the strings all this time? Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with regret. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could use him to get what I wanted. But now I see how foolish I was. Wosu doesn't play fair. And now, I'm paying the price. Kunle felt a surge of determination. He had built his life from the ground up, and he wasn't about to let someone like Wosu tear Sarah's life apart. She may have hurt him in the past, but that didn't mean he was going to stand by and watch her suffer. Sarah, I'm going to help you, Kunle said, his voice steady. We're going to fix this. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide. You can't. He's too powerful. He won't let us get away. Kunle's resolve only grew stronger. Then we'll fight back. We'll find a way to take him down. But just as Kunle was about to say more, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around to see another man standing there. This one much older, his face stern. The man didn't look like someone Kunle wanted to mess with. I wouldn't be so confident if I were you, the man said, his voice low. Wosu doesn't like to lose. And if you're planning to get involved with him, you'd better be prepared for the consequences. Kunle stared at the man, his mind racing. Was this another ally of Wosu's? And what kind of consequences was he talking about? As the man's words hung in the air, Kunle realized just how deep he was getting into this. What had he gotten himself into? Was it already too late to turn back? Kunle felt the weight of the man's warning settle on his shoulders like a heavy stone. The streets around him seemed to blur, and for a moment, the world felt like it was closing in. He looked over at Sarah, whose face had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. She was clearly shaken, but Kunle couldn't just walk away. He had to help her. He had promised himself that he would. The man who had approached them earlier was still standing behind Kunle, his presence looming like a shadow. Kunle turned around to face him. The older man's stern expression didn't change, but there was a hint of something darker in his eyes, a warning that Kunle couldn't ignore. I don't know who you are, Kunle said, his voice firm. But if you think you can scare me into walking away from this, you're wrong. The man chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills down Kunle's spine. You don't get it, do you? This isn't a game. You're dealing with people who don't play by the rules. Wosu will crush you without a second thought if you try to stand in his way. Kunle didn't back down. I've dealt with people who tried to crush me before. It didn't work then, and it won't work now. Sarah stepped forward, her hands wringing together. Kunle, please, don't do this. I didn't want any of this. I never meant to bring you into this mess. Wosu is dangerous. If you get involved, you don't know what he's capable of. Kunle turned to her, his eyes softening. I understand, Sarah, but I'm already involved. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm not going to leave you. The older man snorted, his arms crossed as he watched them. She's right, Kunle. You don't know what you're dealing with. Wosu has his fingers in everything. He's not someone you want to mess with. Kunle took a deep breath, steadying himself. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he couldn't back out now. The past few months of his life had led him to this moment. He had fought too hard to let fear stop him now. I'll deal with Wosu. I'll take him down if I have to, but I'm not going to let you or anyone else tell me what I can or can't do. The man's expression darkened, and he stepped closer to Kunle. You're a fool if you think you can just waltz into Wosu's world and walk out without consequences. But if you want to play this game, then you better be ready for what's coming. With that, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Kunle and Sarah standing there in the quiet aftermath of his warning. Kunle turned back to Sarah, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had just heard. We can do this, Sarah. We'll find a way to get out of this. I promise. Sarah gave him a shaky smile, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can handle this anymore, Kunle. Wosu is too powerful. He won't stop until he has everything. I've already lost everything. I don't know how to fight him. Kunle placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. I'll fight for you. We're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. As they walked to Kunle's car, the weight of their situation pressed down on them. The air around them felt heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Sarah's life had been turned upside down by Wosu, and now, Kunle was caught in the crossfire. But he wasn't going to let fear stop him. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The drive back to Kunle's apartment was tense, both of them lost in their thoughts. Sarah had finally spoken up, but she still seemed distant, as if the events of the past few weeks had worn her down completely. Kunle could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped as if the weight of her past mistakes was too much to bear. When they arrived at Kunle's apartment, he led Sarah inside. He offered her a seat and went to the kitchen to make her something to drink. The silence between them was thick, but Kunle didn't mind. He was still trying to process everything that had happened, still trying to make sense of how his life had taken such an unexpected turn. As Kunle returned to the living room with 2 cups of tea, he saw Sarah sitting on the couch, her eyes distant. She hadn't touched the cup he'd given her. Sarah, what's going on? What are you not telling me? Kunle asked gently, his voice filled with concern. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and sadness. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before speaking. There's something you need to know, something I should have told you a long time ago. Wosu, he's not just a businessman. He's involved in things that could ruin us both. Kunle sat down next to her, his heart pounding. What kind of things? Sarah hesitated, her fingers trembling as she wrapped them around the cup. He's involved in illegal activities. Money laundering, bribery, even worse things. I never knew the full extent of it until I got involved with him. And when I tried to leave him, he threatened me. He said he would destroy my life if I ever tried to walk away. Kunle's blood ran cold. He had suspected that Wosu wasn't the kind of person to be trusted, but hearing it from Sarah made it all too real. How deep does this go? Sarah shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. Too deep. I've already lost so much. And I'm scared, Kunle. I don't want to lose you too. I don't want to bring you into this. You don't deserve this. Kunle grabbed her hands, his grip firm but gentle. You're not alone in this, Sarah. I'm here. We're going to fix this. I won't let him hurt you. But just as Kunle was about to say more, his phone buzzed. He looked down and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. His stomach dropped. I have to take this, he said, quickly standing up. As he answered the call, the voice on the other end sent a chill down his spine. You've been warned, Kunle, the voice said, cold and threatening. Stay away from Sarah, or you'll regret it. Kunle's grip tightened on the phone as the voice hung up. His mind was racing. The situation was getting worse by the minute. Wosu wasn't just a dangerous man. He had connections everywhere, and he wasn't afraid to use them. Kunle turned to Sarah, his face pale. This is bigger than I thought. He's already watching us. The tension in the room escalated as Kunle realized just how deep he was in. Wosu wasn't going to let this go easily. But Kunle wasn't backing down. He had promised Sarah that he would fight for her, and he intended to keep that promise, no matter the cost. Sarah, Kunle said, his voice low but determined, we need to make a plan. We can't just sit here and wait for him to come after us. But just as Kunle was about to lay out his plan, he heard a noise outside the apartment. Car door slamming. Footsteps. Someone was outside. Kunle's heart raced as he looked out the window, but all he saw was a black car parked down the street, its headlights dimmed. Was it Wosu? Was it someone else coming to make sure they knew their place? The fear in the air was palpable. The clock was ticking. The silence in Kunle's apartment grew heavier as the footsteps outside faded, leaving an eerie stillness in the air. Kunle stared out the window, his heart racing, trying to decipher if the car was connected to Wosu or just a coincidence. Sarah sat frozen on the couch, her hands gripping the cup of tea that had gone cold in her lap. Kunle's mind was working in overdrive. Every decision he made now carried weight. Sarah's life was in his hands, and somehow, he had found himself deep in a game he hadn't even signed up for. "I don't know if I can do this, Kunle," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked up at him, her face drained of color. "I've already destroyed so many lives. And now I've brought you into this mess." Kunle turned from the window, his face stern but softening when he saw the tears in Sarah's eyes. He walked over to her, kneeling in front of her, and gently took her hands. "You didn't bring me into anything. I made my choice when I decided to help you. But you don't know what you're up against," she cried, her voice shaking. "Wosu is dangerous. He won't stop until he's crushed me, and if you're standing in his way, he'll do the same to you." Kunle took a deep breath. "I've been through tough times before, Sarah. This is just another obstacle. But I'm not going to let him get away with this. Not after everything he's done to you." But even as Kunle said the words, doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. He had been through tough times before, yes, but this was different. Wosu was no ordinary enemy. He had resources, connections, and a ruthless desire to keep everything under his control. Kunle could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. A knock on the door broke the silence, sending a jolt through Kunle's body. His eyes flicked to Sarah, who was visibly shaking now. She had never been this vulnerable before, and Kunle realized just how deeply Wosu's actions had scarred her. "Stay here," Kunle whispered, as he stood up to approach the door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, but he hesitated. What if it was one of Wosu's men? What if it was someone sent to intimidate him, to send a warning? He glanced back at Sarah. She was watching him, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear. She didn't have to say it, he could see the panic in her eyes. Whatever was happening, they had no control anymore. Kunle finally opened the door, and to his surprise, there was no one there. Just the quiet hum of the city outside. He stepped out onto the small balcony, scanning the area below. Nothing seemed amiss. The car was still parked down the street, but it hadn't moved. Kunle could feel his pulse quicken. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He turned back into the apartment, closing the door behind him. "There's no one out there," Kunle said, his voice calm, though his heart was still racing. But Sarah didn't look reassured. She stood up slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting someone to leap out from behind the walls. "Kunle, I don't feel safe here anymore. Wosu's men are everywhere. They're always watching. They won't stop until they get what they want." Kunle could see the panic in her eyes, but he refused to show fear. He needed to be strong for both of them. "We need to leave, Sarah. I have a place where we can go. It's safe and no one knows about it. We can figure things out there." Sarah hesitated, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if he finds us? What if we can never escape?" Kunle walked over to her, gently taking her hand. "We can't live in fear, Sarah. We have to keep moving forward. We'll be okay. I promise." They didn't have much time. Kunle grabbed a bag, quickly packing a few essential things. Some clothes, his phone, his wallet, and a few of Sarah's belongings. He didn't know what they would face next, but he knew they couldn't stay here. As they made their way down the stairs and out of the apartment complex, Kunle's eyes constantly darted to the street. The black car was still there, but now it was parked closer to the entrance. Someone was inside, watching. Kunle's heart skipped a beat. "I think they're following us," Kunle whispered to Sarah, his voice low and urgent. "Stay close. Don't make eye contact with anyone." They walked briskly down the sidewalk, making sharp turns to avoid being followed. Kunle's mind raced. Where could they go? Who could they trust? Wosu's network was vast, and he knew better than anyone how dangerous the world of power and corruption could be. After several minutes, they reached a small, inconspicuous cafe on a quiet street corner. Kunle pushed open the door and quickly guided Sarah inside, his eyes scanning the room. It was a quiet, peaceful place, with only a few customers scattered around. Kunle knew the owner, a friend from his past who owed him a favor. It was as safe a place as any for the time being. Kunle turned to Sarah. "We'll stay here for now. I'll call in some help. But we need to lay low for a while. Sarah nodded, but Kunle could still see the fear in her eyes. She was scared, and no matter what he said, he couldn't erase the look of dread that had settled over her face. I don't want to live like this, Kunle, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't want to be afraid every day, waiting for something terrible to happen. I just want peace. Kunle reached over and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. We're going to get through this, Sarah. I'm not going to let him hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you. But even as he said the words, Kunle's mind was racing with the unknown. What would they do if Wosu found them? What if it was already too late to escape? As the minutes passed, Kunle tried to reach out to a few people who might be able to help them. But the silence on the other end of the phone line only added to the tension. No one was answering. He had trusted the wrong people and now they were gone. Suddenly, Kunle's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. His pulse quickened as he answered the call. Kunle, the voice on the other end said, cold and threatening. You think you can hide from me? You're just making this harder on yourself. I'm coming for you, and when I do, you'll wish you never crossed me. The call ended abruptly, leaving Kunle staring at the screen, his mind spinning. This wasn't just a threat anymore. Wosu was coming for them, and he wasn't going to stop until he had what he wanted. Kunle looked over at Sarah, her face pale, and he could see the fear in her eyes. He's coming? Kunle whispered, his voice grim. We don't have much time. Kunle's grip tightened around his phone as he stared at the dark screen, the words from Wosu's threatening message echoing in his head. I'm coming for you. You'll wish you never crossed me. He quickly pocketed the phone and turned to Sarah, who was sitting across from him in the quiet cafe, her hands trembling around her cup. Her face had gone ashen, and her eyes were wide with fear. Yet there was something else in them too. Something that Kunle had only seen in people who had been pushed too far. Desperation. We need to leave here now, Kunle said, his voice low but urgent. Wosu isn't going to stop until he gets what he wants. We can't stay in one place for too long. Sarah's breath hitched, and she looked around the cafe, as if expecting someone to leap out from behind the walls. She'd been on edge since they'd arrived. But where do we go, Kunle? She asked, her voice quivering. You said you had help, but no one is answering. What if we're just running in circles? Kunle walked over to her, crouching down beside her so she wouldn't have to look up. We will find a way, promise, but we need to move fast. He scanned the room, his mind racing. This was no longer just a matter of helping Sarah. It was about survival now. Wosu's reach was longer than Kunle had ever imagined. The man didn't just deal with money. He was connected to every dark corner of the business world, from corruption to extortion to people who would do anything for power. Kunle could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He had made the decision to help Sarah, but now it seemed like there was no turning back. The door to the cafe opened, and Kunle instinctively froze. A woman in a dark coat stepped inside, her face partially hidden by the hood of her jacket. She glanced around the room briefly, before her eyes settled on Kunle. It was as if she knew exactly where to find him. Kunle's heart skipped a beat. Could this be one of Wosu's men? Was she here to drag them back? But then the woman took off her hood, revealing a familiar face. Kunle's heart raced even faster, though now for a different reason. Fazia, Kunle whispered under his breath, feeling a surge of both relief and disbelief. Fazia had been an old friend from his days in the tech world. She had disappeared from the scene years ago, but Kunle had heard whispers about her connection to the underground world of business. But never, not once, did he imagine that she would be the one walking through that door now, offering them a way out. Kunle, Fazia said, walking up to him and giving him a brief nod. Her eyes flicked to Sarah, who was still sitting in silence, her fear written all over her face. You look like you could use some help. Kunle stood up quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. What are you doing here, Fazia? How did you find us? She didn't immediately answer. Instead, she gave Kunle a knowing look. Let's just say I have a few connections. And I've been watching you for a while now. Kunle felt the ground shift beneath him. Had she been following them all along? And if she had, why didn't she reach out sooner? You've been watching us? Kunle repeated, his voice laced with suspicion. Why? What do you want? Fazia held up her hands in mock surrender. Relax. I'm not here to hurt you. Wosu is dangerous, Kunle. I know what he's capable of, and I can help you both. But you need to trust me. There's no time to explain everything right now. We have to move. Kunle glanced at Sarah, whose eyes were still wide, trying to process everything. What's going on, Kunle? She asked, her voice shaking. Who is she? Why should we trust her? Kunle took a deep breath and turned back to Fazia. Can we really trust you? Wosu is already after us. You said you can help, but how? Fazia looked around quickly, her eyes scanning the cafe, as if she expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. I've already made arrangements. I can get you both out of here to a safe place. But you need to come with me now. No more questions. Trust me, or you won't get another chance. Kunle hesitated. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Wosu's men were everywhere, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled deeper into a game that he didn't fully understand. But Fazia was a familiar face, and in this mess, familiarity was all he had left. Let's go, Kunle said finally, his voice firm. He didn't have time to think. He had to act. Fazia led the way out of the cafe, keeping her movements calm and deliberate, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. Kunle followed closely behind her, with Sarah trailing at his side. Every step felt like a countdown, as if they were being watched by eyes they couldn't see. Kunle couldn't help but feel the gnawing anxiety in his stomach. They had no idea what they were walking into. They exited the cafe into the cool night air, and Kunle immediately took in their surroundings. Fazia motioned for them to follow her into an alley behind the building, where a black SUV was parked. The driver, a man with a stern expression, was already waiting by the vehicle. Kunle glanced at Sarah, who looked just as confused as he felt. She had no idea who Fazia really was or what she was involved in, but she seemed to be putting her trust in Kunle's judgment. Get in, Fazia said, opening the door to the vehicle. We don't have time to waste. Kunle looked at the SUV, then at Fazia, and then at Sarah. Every instinct told him to be cautious, but the alternative, staying here and waiting for Wosu's men to find them, was far worse. He nodded to Sarah, who seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then she followed Kunle into the car. As the vehicle sped off into the night, Kunle looked out the window, his mind racing. He could feel the tension building in his chest. Where were they going? Who was Fazia really working for? And what would happen if Wosu found out they were leaving? The car made a sharp turn down a narrow street, and Kunle could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in. The city outside the window seemed to blur, the streetlights flashing by like the ticking of a clock. Fazia finally broke the silence. We'll be safe for now, she said, her voice calm but with an edge of urgency. But we can't stay on the move forever. Wosu's people are relentless. We need to figure out our next step, and we need to do it quickly. Kunle nodded, his thoughts swirling. They were still far from safe, but maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. But as he looked at Sarah, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was still ahead. The car sped through the quiet streets, the tension inside thick enough to cut with a knife. Kunle could feel his heartbeat in his throat, but there was no turning back now. Sarah sat next to him, her eyes wide, her breath still shaky. She kept glancing at Fazia, who remained unusually calm in the back seat, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Kunle had a million questions, but now wasn't the time. He knew they were heading into uncharted territory, and he had to trust that Fazia had a plan. But the unease in his gut wouldn't go away. There were too many unknowns, too many pieces to this puzzle that he couldn't yet see. We'll be there soon, Fazia said, her voice calm but firm. We just need to stay low for a while. The people I'm working with will help, but you'll have to trust them. Kunle nodded, though doubt still lingered. Are we safe now? He asked, glancing at Sarah. Fazia's eyes flicked briefly to the rearview mirror. As safe as we can be. Wosu has eyes everywhere, but we've got a plan. But Kunle couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were just running away, hiding from something bigger than they were ready to face. As the car turned onto a quiet road and stopped in front of a modest apartment building, Kunle felt a weight lift, but it was quickly replaced with suspicion. Fazia ushered them out quickly, her expression unreadable. "This is the safest place for now," she said, leading them into the building. Kunle didn't trust her completely, but he had no other choice. They had to stay hidden. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for part 2. The suspense is just getting started. Will Sarah and Kunle finally escape, or will Wosu catch up with them? What lies ahead for our characters? Find out all this and more in the next chapter. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's the only way this channel can grow and bring you more of the stories you love. Like, share, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next.